Tell me what it was like. Were you playing? You were playing in a vast warehouse space, which is it's not the first time the CBSO has played in a vast warehouse space. I can remember that opera, the Tippett opera, The Icebreak, in a vast warehouse in Digbeth. So this was a vast warehouse in Longbridge. Can you just tell me what it was like?
Well, it was an incredible effort, I think, from everybody to make it happen in the first instance, because I think the planning around it had to be just immense in order to make sure that we were COVID compliant and that everybody was safe and stayed healthy, but also to get, good video, good camera angles, good sound, and all the complexities of making music together when we were all very spread out. We all had 2 meters around us, which is, as you know, quite a tricky thing. As a string player playing in a string section, it's very difficult because you don't get a sense of the collective sound at all. You just get a sense of your individual sound, and then you don't really know whether what you've done was any good or not. You do what you do and you go like, oh, did I get away with that? Was that all right? Or you get some kind of feedback that actually, I remember actually when we first played Firebird in the rehearsal, that was the moment for me where I got those goosebumps for the first time, that I actually thought, this is what we've missed. This collectiveness of coming together, sharing something really beautiful and really remarkable that really means something. This Firebird is obviously rebirth and all that sort of symbolism around it, and also the piece that we opened Symphony Hall with Simon was Firebird, so that came full circle as well in that, and it was lovely to see Simon again. For those of us who'd worked with him, the orchestra has obviously dramatically changed since he left, but still there's a few of us still left, and also a great treat for everybody else to work with him and to see what he can do with what we offer, how that partnership now works. So it was a complete joy to come back and do that. And now we've all gone back on furlough again, which is very sad. So it was a bit like having the most amazing party, picnic, celebration, and then suddenly the whole world shuts again. So we're hoping to be up and running in other ways fairly soon, but it is tricky.
It's very tough times, and very tough times emotionally. And I imagine it was that reunion aspect of it with Simon as well, because Simon appointed you, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Amazing.
Way back. Yeah, it's nearly 30 years ago now.
Did you present the first children's or family concert the CBSO ever did? Is that right?
Well, I think the first one, certainly, I think they might have done some way back, like in the 1930s or something, but the first one that we did in this era that Simon was, when he came, he was very keen that we did family and schools concerts, and that was the first time they were properly part of the sort of schedule and part of the regular offer, and now there are loads of them through the season, through all different sorts of age groups. And so I was the first person to present that with him, and we had a great time actually, because that we presented in pairs, so they just pulled a few people out of the orchestra at the time who wanted to have a go, and we did some fairly low-key schools concerts for everybody to have a try, see how this works. And out of that, sort of how I started, really, just sort of, somebody said, I think you might be quite good at this, or do you want to have a go at this? And I go, well, why not? Yeah, and then it just sort of evolved. And I think that's something special actually about CBSO education, is it's very much led by the musicians, and I think that makes it more relevant and more personal, and then it's easier, I think, because with those concerts you're quite often pushing your colleagues to do things they wouldn't normally do, and so I think when they know you and they trust you, that they know that if you ask them to do something, you're not going to humiliate them or expose them or do anything horrible to them. It's only about sharing how remarkable they are. And so supporting them, and I always would go and have a quick word, would you mind doing this? And if I were to come up to you and ask you a question, how would is that okay? Because you have to pave the way for that, otherwise it can be, people can feel vulnerable, and you don't want people to feel vulnerable. It should be fun and joyful. And so I think that's quite a special thing about the way CBSO runs their education.
I mean, obviously, you've understood the psychology of a children's or presented concert completely. I mean, you understand it from the player's side and from the presenter's side and from the audience's side as well, because I mean, having children yourself who've obviously watched these things, and you must have had fantastic feedback from everybody to build it.
They were totally my focus group when they were littler, younger. My kids, we started Notelets, which is the program for early years, which is, we say 3 to 5, but it's effectively 0 to about 8, in terms of who actually comes. And when Katie, my oldest, was about 3, I thought I want to bring her to a concert, but there's no concert that would work for her, because she needs to move and she needs to see people like her, and she needs to have something that's familiar to her in terms of the music. So I thought, well, why should we impose our idea of what a concert is on her? Why can't we meet her in that? So we make it a dialogue of expectation in a way, and make her comfortable with that. So that's how that happened. And then from then on, they were always, and they still are actually, a focus group for me. It's like, what do you think? Is this any good, or is this not any good? Or, would this hit really chime, or would this not? And so I think it's been really useful to have them there as the backdrop. I'm gonna need a little help from you. If I ask you for a rule, will you tell me what to do?
Well, this is the Clock Hunter Safety Schools performances, and it's sponsored by DBS Lawyers and work that they do in schools around road safety.
Well, music is a great way of engaging children, and a message can get across much more powerfully with a song and with some good strong words and a fun experience.
The CBSO got me involved as a professional storyteller to weave a narrative that would bring the music into play and cover all the road safety aspects, and also make it a bit of fun for the children.
I'm going to cross the road.
I think it's great fun because it's very different to what we normally do. It's almost like a piece of theatre, really. So it sort of gets the message across, which could otherwise be quite dry, in a really entertaining and engaging, interactive way.
It was brilliant to see other people play live instruments. I saw the piano, the drums, the flute, and the violins. I really enjoyed the music.
That's amazing to have that connection with your kids still through music, and to be able to bring that to many, many children now, because of course that extends beyond the CBSO to NCO, the National Children's Orchestras.
Yeah, absolutely. NCOs, I've now had 3 years at NCO as the artistic and educational director. And it's a huge organisation. People don't realise. They think of it a little bit like NYO as one orchestra, but it's actually 11 orchestras, NCO, across the whole country. 727 kids in membership this year, I think. So it's huge. And it's more of a sort of orchestral training programme rather than an orchestra per se. So when I went, I was very keen. I mean, the kids played extremely well, but there were some things I felt that were a little bit missing. So they were sort of kids, we sort of almost emulating what an adult orchestra would do and would be. So the big question for us was, what could a children's orchestra do that an adult orchestra wouldn't do or couldn't do? So what makes us unique because we're children? And that comes from, I think, playfulness, desire to take risks, experimentation, creativity, fun, all those things that should actually be part of music making, whether you're a child or an adult. But bringing those a little bit more to the fore. So we sort of designed a curriculum based on four ideas. One is mastery or excellence, that you're always striving to do your very best, which is really important, and is why the children come to a national organisation like us. Then creativity or autonomy, so that they start to develop who they are as individuals. Then child voice, so what is it that they want, what's the purpose of it for them? And then finally, well-being, so how they're feeling and thinking both physically and emotionally in their music making. So sort of broadening through the vehicle of orchestral playing, broadening the educational process, and therefore the tools that will be totally transferable to whatever it is that they choose to do.
How have you found, because obviously we are all, readjusting our teaching styles online, those of us who teach, to accommodate Zoom and the difficulties of not being in the same room as somebody, which for a musical instrument are huge and might seem kind of insurmountable, but obviously you found a way to really reach these children and to give them a sense of community and a sense of enthusiasm when it comes to music making and group music making. So how have you been doing that?
Well, it's really interesting because the one thing we are really about is ensemble playing. We're not about instrumental learning, we're about ensemble playing. And that is the very thing that you can't do digitally. So our raison d'etre has sort of gone. So and one of our staff actually likened it to, well, we can't play a Grand Slam tennis tournament at the moment, but we can go to the musical gym, or we can train for that moment where we can play our Grand Slam again. And I thought that was quite a nice analogy. So we did these inspirational webinars, which were basically to be fun, but also to keep children motivated and connected. And one of the keys was to make it as interactive as possible. So they weren't just watching the screen, they had things to vote on through the webinars, and they had they could ask questions. And so there were always moments about every 6 or 7 minutes I threw in something that they had to respond to, so that they were always waiting for that next task kind of thing. So I think that was the key to the success of those in a way. And also asking, I mean, a lot of the guests we had are really remarkable musicians, but if you ask them silly funny things like what's their favorite flavor of crisps or whatever, the kids go, oh really? And that's the thing that they remember, in a funny sort of way. But actually you've had incredibly human conversation with one of these gods of the classical music kind of world. So humanizing, as you were saying earlier, humanizing the personalities and making them relevant, but also then if you aspire to be like them, then that feels more attainable because they're real people. Yeah. So we have the results in of the poll. It's very close between a toffee crisp and a mint aero. What's the answer here, Ailish?
Oh, yes, you are all brilliant, because it is a toffee crisp. And I tell you something, I wouldn't give you a kick on the shin for a dark chocolate bounty, a Topic or a Lion bar. You couldn't have picked worse bars. Now, I might eat an mint aero all right if I was desperate, but toffee crisp is the one, guys.
I don't know how they know this, but they seem to get chocolate bars right every time. So,
I mean, who eats Topics? They're dreadful.
Okay, so
and a Lion bar, you might as well just be eating cardboard.
Oh no, that's just because I love a Lion bar, Ailish.
Do you?
That's where we differ.
Oh no, it's all just wafers, not nearly enough chocolate.
We had section meetups, so those were social, where they came and we had to design it so that there weren't more than, I think, 9 people on a screen, because otherwise it goes into 2 screens and you can't see each other. So we were quite canny about the number games when you want to do something social. And then we had masterclasses that were bigger, but were kind of led by our team, and our tutors got brilliant at doing screen sharing, video sharing, audio sharing, Kahoot quizzes, all sorts of things that you can do to break it up and keep it varied and keep it interactive, and keep the kids on their toes, really, so that it's not just a passive experience. It's got to be totally active in whatever way you can make it. So, and they can play on mute, so you can play together so long as they're muted. So we did some of that. Then we created listening challenges. So so they download something which said, go and listen to these 3-4 things and ask us or answer these questions or write a story about it or do a program note about it, or what do you like about this performance compared to this performance, or for example the bassoonist did the big Berceau's Firebird solo, and 3 or 4 different recordings, and you can still listen to that when you're 8, and work out what it is that you like about somebody or what do you prefer, and then that helps shape you and who you are. So those kind of things worked really well. Then we did the multi-tracking, which also worked really well. But these were really little people working with click tracks. That's quite hard, So one thing they'll come out a lot better at is rhythm, because they've all been working with this, why you see the one headphone on, one headphone off, and we asked them to try and get some movement into it, because for the video that was great. So you can see them trying really hard with all these new ideas, and so we created this amazing mambo. Written by Ryan Lindham, especially for us, written because partly because of copyright, it's tricky, but also because we wanted to be able to think of the video as well as the audio, and also the learning. So there are moments in it, like our percussion do a sort of rhythmic question, and then the rest of the orchestra play back a rhythmic answer, and they could use anything they wanted in their house to do that. So then you see crazy things of them playing on, there's somebody playing on a whole load of deck chairs, and so just have and it goes by in a flash, but it's just a little bit of joy and a little bit of fun. For that, we had 330 kids involved and over 1,000 videos that went into making that, and it's 4 minutes of music. So you don't want to do it every day, but it was a remarkable achievement and something they were really proud of. And they used Acapella, which is the app that you can multi-track yourself. So we did a lot of arrangements, so they could just download the arrangements and just start to multi-track themselves. And then they started to play with them and then create their own different layers on top of it. So one of them played the accordion, so he added an accordion part to it, and then they added their own percussion, and then some of them dressed up. And so it's like giving them that little kernel of a seed of an idea. And so you could just do it totally straight and it works brilliantly, but you could take it somewhere totally different. And so it's just giving them those. And then there was quite a lot of work around well-being on the website, so there were webinars about that. And also we teamed up with this amazing Olympic fencer called Claire Bennett, who came on to talk to us about excellence in performance and about disappointment and about all the complexities of trying to have some kind of a high level career in music. And she was brilliant. So crossing the genres was really, really good. And we had a sports psychologist come on and talk to us. So we were digging into all those things, and none of this was compulsory for the kids because a lot of them are quite young and nothing's difficult for them yet. So you don't want to, instill a sense of you might get nervous one day, but because they never have, and they may never do, or they'll address it when they need to. So you don't want to say, well, you need to sit and watch this because this is going to be helpful, because they'll come to it when it's right for them. But it's there, and it's there as a resource, and it'll be there as a permanent resource.
I think don't be afraid to be different, because actually being different is a wonderful thing, because you stand out from the crowd if you're different, and people remember you as well if you're different.
But what I would say to my 12-year-old self is making mistakes is absolutely fine. Stop worrying about getting things wrong or doing something you weren't expected to do, because you learn from mistakes, and mistakes are actually what make you grow and develop.
I think I would probably say to myself, but I would say to any young person who's just sort of, you know, on the brink of everything, that don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. It'll be all right. And things will go weird and strange and difficult. They'll change shape, but don't be afraid. It'll be all right.
There are two things I'm fascinated by what you've just been saying. First of which is this interdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary thing of learning from, and especially the sports world. I think that's something that you know, the arts is a bit shy to admit that how similar we are to other very seemingly very different activities, but
Yes.
so much to learn and so much to take from that.
I think in some ways, when you take yourself out of your own world, you can see the obvious in somebody else's world that you can't see by just looking at your own. Things like mental preparation, which is something we don't really have. You know, everyone kind of thinks they half do it, but they kind of don't do it. So actually, what are the tools? How do you do that? And the other thing was support networks. So who is your support network, you know? And actually, if you think about it, you know, probably you have had people who have been your support network, but who else might it have been that might have helped you? You know, and we think of NCO as a support network for our kids, but also their teacher is, and there might be a mentor that they might want. That's something we want to really expand at NCO, is the idea of having an older mentor for these younger kids that's not, you know, inattainably older than them, but is aspirationally connected.
That's something I wish for the orchestral world, as and when it gets back to some semblance of its former self, is this idea of mentorship taken really seriously by within the orchestra, so by players, older generation players for the younger generation, and also with students. We can't do enough of it, and I think that it feels like a completely closed door to the generation who are now just graduating from music college or about to go into the final stages of music college. I think it feels like there is nothing out there for them. And I think showing people different ways of making music and different, you know, certainly using different technologies and all of that is very, very helpful. But there needs to be, I think, far more nurturing within each of these organizations as well. Certainly going forward.
One great quote that I always love, which was C.S. Lewis, who said, we read to know we're not alone. And that's a little bit the same as music. I think that actually we play music, make music, enjoy music to know that we're not alone. And then that mentorship thing takes that a step further, doesn't it? Because you're it's very easy to feel judged every minute of every day sitting in an orchestra, isn't it? Yeah. And people, I mean, that has changed over the years, and conductors are much more collaborative now than they used to be, I think, and more generally supportive. But still within the communities and within the players themselves and the audition process and the hierarchies and all those things are so hideous that actually, you know, you're kind of pushed into this really quite uncomfortable place with always a lot of support or warmth and also there's not one way of being a musician, you know, and orchestras kind of try and funnel you into this sort of, on some levels, into this one size fits all. And that's what's exciting at NCO, is trying to help the kids decide what kind of musician they want to be and how creative they want to be, what their individuality, what their purpose is, rather than the sort of slightly more Victorian model of creating a product out of your education that you can therefore then deliver this job that now doesn't exist anymore, you know, that kind of process. So challenging them to think differently. And I think orchestras are so ripe for that sort of flourishing moment, even in adults, that actually if you start to let them be more, contribute more, be more individual, share more, have more ideas, then it does get messy, you know, but it is the strength, and it's the strength of the connection, because people connect through people, don't they? And it's the strength of the connection with an audience, whatever that audience is, and I remember somebody said to me, you think a lot about this, don't you? Or you think a lot about how you connect. It's like, yeah, but what else is there to think about? You know? So that's the one thing that kind of drives everything that I do, I think, is connecting people with something of meaning and value.
Yeah, and that the constant evolution that you talk about. I know this is something you have addressed in your TED Talks and your various addresses and articles that you have written, which are fascinating. But is this something that you feel is achievable by orchestras at the moment? Because orchestras really are in a pickle, to put it mildly. This is a very, very difficult point. And how do you see rebirth and regeneration being possible?
I think there are lots of barriers and there are lots of things that we need to look at changing, I think. And I think one of them is the role of the individual musician within the collective. So empowering the individual to be more and therefore to have more responsibility, because if you're in a role where you're told what to do all day long, which you can feel like in an orchestra, you start to absolve yourself of responsibility for things because you're not empowered in its delivery, really. So I think more empowerment and therefore more responsibility and more accountability of each individual person within the organisation is really valuable. Then better representation then through the structure, a levelling of hierarchies as much as possible. You know, why do we have to say I'm a tutti violinist like it's an apology? You know, I'm a violinist and I'm an amazing violinist because I'm part of this amazing collective of orchestras. So trying to treat people a little bit more individually and a little bit more equally, I think. And I think there's the whole question of connecting with audiences and communities, which I think it absolutely needs to change as a especially, you know, it's been given an added impetus, I think, from the Black Lives Matters debates that are going on now, and you know, we're having to hold our hands up, I think, and saying we're not doing this very well. And we would like to be doing this better and connecting much more widely, and that's about creating relevance to your society and your community, isn't it? And not being sort of Victorian about this is great music, therefore you will listen to it. It's about meeting people where they are, like we did, like I was saying with Notelets, like you do with who's your audience, who do you want them to be, and how do you make what you do relevant and meaningful to them. And so understanding that dynamic. And there's a great Jesse Norman quote about the connection between the orchestra, or the performer, and the audience. Replenishes both. So if you get that right, your performance goes from being good to being extraordinary. And so understanding that moment and that delivery, and you know, no matter whether you played slightly out of tune or you didn't come in totally together, if you've made a performance of incredible energy, incredible connection, incredible meaning, none of that matters, you know. So focusing more, I think, on the meaning and the impact and the individuality is where orchestras need to go, I would say.
I mean, that's extremely difficult at the moment because the opportunities are so limited, you know, to work together, to even have a conversation about that's face to face with instruments in hand to see how to make it happen is extremely difficult. And also recording any digital content is really the antithesis of that spontaneity. It's extremely hard to keep any kind of original energy or motivation for creativity in your performance when you're forced to reassess it then immediately afterwards and say, well, actually, I didn't play that very in tune. And it's going to go on the internet for forever, not very in tune. Such a difficult thing to get one's head around as a performer.
It's very, very interesting. It's an inner struggle, isn't it? Because you always want what you do to be the very best. And especially if it's going to go on, you know, we have this kind of fear that it's going to go online and then somebody's going to look it up every time you go for a job interview or an audition or something. Oh my gosh, she didn't do that very well, we can't use her, you know. So, but you know, in lockdown we formed a little street orchestra here, and I had to then totally reassess that exact question of quality, because people were filming that and it was going all over the place, and the BBC Midlands News came at, you know, it was pretty big, you know, in terms of its reach, far bigger than most of the other work I do, you know, in terms of the numbers that saw it. But for me, the quality was it was tricky because it wasn't what I was used to, because anybody could come and join our street orchestra, and we just did an arrangement for whatever instrumental lineup we had. So, you know, some of them were great, some of them were kind of okay, most of them we got away with, I think. But then reassessing what that sense of quality is, and I did have to have a few words with myself quietly, and but then also think about the bigger meaning and the bigger picture, the bigger value of that. But you're right, but then we got such a buzz from that. It was a focus for the week. Everybody loved it, you know, and we played quite sort of slow, gentle stuff. We started with Over the Rainbow, obviously, and then we were doing quite gentle stuff in the early days of lockdown. And we had at one point we had an arrangement of the can. I had thought, we can't play the can in lockdown. But then there came a moment where everybody wanted to hear the can, you know, where it's like, come on, we just need a bit of joy, and not too much introspection and sadness, but we just want to. So they were all canning up and down the road, which is great, you know, and so just understanding what it's there to do, I guess, and everything's a different context. Of course, we all want excellence. Of course, we want to play well, and you wouldn't ever want that not to happen. But it's not the only thing that we need to be doing.
Amazing to find that true applicability of your music making just for that absolute moment, that for those people in that place. It's fantastic to hone in on that. But I think that's a particular skill of yours, Kath, because obviously with Notelets, developing various education projects at the CBSO, now obviously with NCO as well, you have a very clear vision for your mission to bring music to children, and String Credibles has taken it again to another level, and it'd be great to hear about the genesis of that and the whole journey it's been on.
Yeah, well, we formed String Credibles in 2014, four of us in the orchestra, with a passion for going out and playing in schools, going and playing anywhere where people aren't expecting you to be, if you know what I mean. So forcing you to actually make that connection, and thinking about what it is that you need to do that, which is where the sort of pitch, pace, perform mantra came from, which is our sort of ethos, which is pitch it right. So that's about knowing who your audience is, not turning up with a program for a totally different type of audience, because every audience is different. 3 to 5 year olds are different from 5 to 7 year olds, and understanding that is a key to actually delivering something that really works for them. So pitch it right, then pace it right is something that is people get wrong all the time. I think that actually, what's the energy of the pieces that you're playing? And how does that take, for example, young children to a place where they can really listen intently and deeply, but also have fun? So understanding the pacing of it is key, and then performing it in a way that works for whoever it is that you're performing it to. And that involves your stage presence, your body language, your eye contact, how you speak, how you communicate more generally from the platform, how you can be spontaneous, because that's a massive connector, how you communicate emotion. So we have a big program with our apprentices, which we're just going digital with at the moment. And we've actually, if you were here a couple of days ago, there's massive green screens up and us all doing crazy videos of trying to put all this content online now. But actually, you know, understanding how you can be a better performer, regardless of how much practice you've done or how good you are as an instrumentalist. How can you be a better performer, and how can your performance therefore change people?
As Stringcredibles, what really excites us is to go into schools and share the music that we love with whoever is there to listen. And how we communicate that has to be different depending on who that audience is. And in this project, we have 16 apprentices, young musicians, who we are supporting to do exactly the same thing. We're teaching the apprentices really about the gap between you as a musician and the audience. What happens in that space?
So we are at a Services for Education building in Aston, and what we're doing is it's called the Stringcredibles Apprenticeship. It's a bit daunting, but it's really exciting at the same time because it's like nothing I've ever done before.
So the mantra we have for this whole programme is pitch, pace, perform, and that will be one of our hashtags. So pitch is about how you decide what's right for the audience you're going to be playing for.
Pace is all about the energy of your performance, and it's about having a thread between you and the audience so that you take them with you on a journey.
And perform is about how you deliver, how you stand, how you speak, how you play, how you communicate in the actual music making. When you're really aware of an audience and the connection between you and an audience, it fundamentally changes how you deliver, because you have to be bigger, you have to be larger than life. But that's what makes it really exciting. It's actually having the confidence really to embrace the risk.
Wearing shoes on your feet.
Let's just go over just quickly what you're going to say on the little bits that we started talking about the other day.
We've all got rhythm in our bodies. So what I want you all to do is I want you all to close your eyes and put your hand on your heart really quietly. And I want you to listen, and I want you to listen to your heartbeat inside you. Can you all hear it? Yeah? Yeah, I mean, the kids were a bit unpredictable, but that made it more fun in a way, because we didn't know what they were going to say. Liked it. It was amazing! I loved it.
We have a lot of fun as a forum. We feed off each other and we evolve it all, and it's sort of every time we do it, it gets better, which is lovely. And Amy, the viola player, has done a load of work online over lockdown, amazing video editing now, so she's absolutely coming into her own, and we've got all these incredible green screen backgrounds. And we did filmed one last week with a massive science lab behind us, looking at the scientific aspects of it, with again a lot of humour and ridiculous glasses and things like that. So it's a lot of fun, but also with a very serious kind of underbelly, if you like. But I think people learn when they're having fun.
You obviously have your pitch, pace, perform content, but there's lots more to Stringcredibles as well as these. You obviously now not able to just at the moment, but we're going into schools with other shows, other projects. I know certainly World War One was one of them.
So we have a show called Making Music, which is basically it's like making a cake. So all the ingredients you need to make music are like the ingredients you need to make it. Anyone can do it if you just understand what those ingredients are. So we go through those with a lot of. We always have visuals as well. I think that's really important. So have a lot of fun with that one. That's the most widely toured program that we take out.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are the Stringcredibles.
The Stringcredibles are amazing. They play music, play anything, without bows, with bows, just
And with high notes and low notes.
There wasn't one of them that wasn't like, there was fun. There was a lot of fun, and music was presented as being a fun option. And then there was the wonderful moments when we had the Bach played and suddenly the children were quiet and listening carefully, because they quite naturally picked up on the differences in the different parts of the show. So I think that was particularly effective.
It makes you feel special that they've come to your school and they've come to you. They're really good. It made me feel really excited. It was really good, so I definitely recommend it. Yeah.
But the World War I one was we created over the centenary, the 4 years. That was a big Arts Council project, funded project, and we took it to museums and schools. And so that was, again, curriculum linked, but also dealing with some really quite difficult topics for primary aged children. So how do you do that sensitively and with meaning? And we had a minute silence in that show, which we could only do by understanding how to pace a performance well. And it worked every time, thank goodness. But, you know, actually to come to a point where you can have, you know, 300 children completely silent thinking about something that's really, and we had a lot of tears, and we had quite a lot of teachers in tears, not so many children, but you could see quite a lot of the kids going, "Oh, Mrs. crying." And so, you know, it really touched people in a way that actually, and we had to, it was really hard to come out of that show. The ending was really difficult because kids need to leave feeling sort of empowered and happy, but it's not happy ending really. So we commissioned a piece so we could do it just with music. So we had the minute silence, then we had the last post, and then it went in to keep the home fires burning, and we then layered up some of the wartime tunes, and it came out on A Long Way to Tipperary, and, you know, some of the more optimistic sort of songs. So we managed to navigate our way out, then everyone could clap and feel sort of a sense of resolution, but we'd also been somewhere really quite deep and quite dark.
This is a really exciting project for us. We're using stories from the First World War, poems, literature, and we're combining that with images from children's books and images from the Imperial War Museum. To that we add the context of being in a First World War exhibition in a museum, and then on top of that, finally, we add music, which means so much to us.
So welcome to the year 1914. We've travelled back in time 100 years to discover one of the most horrible wars in history, the First World War. Britain won the war, but today we don't celebrate it as a happy win. World War I was so terrible, it made people unhappy all over the world.
It's just amazing that it can be played now. Right now.
It's really emotional for us, this project, because the music is very powerful. It's been lovely to work with the songs from the period, Pack Up Your Troubles, Keep the Home Fires Burning, and when that tune comes soaring over the top of the last post, it's been really emotional for us.
Well, it felt like it was a bit sad because all the people in the war got really killed.
Music helps the children to remember really key historical facts. It helps them to identify with the emotions that the soldiers and the people of the time would be feeling.
We include them in the show, so they are contributing by singing, marching, learning rhythms that will help them learn the facts as well.
It was interesting because we learned quite a lot of stuff that we didn't know before.
It was a mix of like a history lesson and a concert.
Yeah, they made it interesting as well, which is good.
It's really lovely to be playing classical music in a museum, because usually children hear music but from quite far away, but when you're in an exhibition up close, it brings the museum to life for them.
Like, you think about all the soldiers that were in the World War and fought for the country.
We're connecting to our new audiences, to future audiences. Some of these kids have heard Elgar, Shostakovich, Frank Bridge all for the first time, and they've loved it.
You got to hear lots of the music that they would sing as well, down in the trenches.
Music provides a really wonderful way into accessing emotion for children. It can change the way we feel.
It was great. I really enjoyed watching and listening to it. It's just amazingly performed.
They put it over really well, and very good for children and adults alike.
Melodies were absolutely beautiful. It was really delightful.
Loads of people should go and see it, and it's really it's good music that they play, and I learned a lot from it.
They are inspiring and they are incredible. That's probably why they put incredible in their name.
We've got Christmas things. We've actually just designed a Christmas programme for schools, so we're hoping a COVID compliant Christmas programme because, again, kids are going to want to have a bit of fun at Christmas if possible. So can we do that in a way that isn't dangerous and is educational and fun and all those things? So we're always thinking of new things and dreaming, and we have an amazing project manager who makes it all possible, which is fantastic. And there's, of course, a lot of fundraising and stuff that goes along, and a board and all that stuff that goes along to make it all happen.
The energy of the four of you, the different skill sets and everything that you bring individually to this quartet is something to behold, I have to say.
I was thinking about this the other day. I think we're just incredibly kind to each other. There's never any... There are probably moments where we irritate each other. There must be, but actually there are things that we are all good at that without one of us, it wouldn't work, So being generous about whatever it is that somebody's not so good at, knowing that when it comes to this moment, that's the one that they're going to fly with. Beyond, some of us are real planners, some of us are real on the hoof people, for example, but I know that anything I plan, for example, is not going to be quite as good as what Amy might do on the hoof, So having that understanding of actually where our strengths lie, because you need the both.
And the digital side of things, because obviously it's been a huge learning curve. You just referenced Amy becoming really excellent at video editing. How have you felt about turning all of this digital? How does it feel to you? Does it feel like something that has a future, or are you using it as a sort of holding pattern until you can get back to...
I think both, really. I think it definitely has a future, and it definitely has a lot of possibilities, and I'm really, in a way, quite grateful for the time to have invested in thinking about it and working out what works. And obviously the tech industry is evolving all the time, and it probably won't be that long before we can play in real time together, which will transform everything. And it has a way of being more inclusive in some ways, potentially, that actually you don't have to travel, so you can reach people very effortlessly. But it can be a divider around inclusion because of people's Wi-Fi or people's access to technology and that kind of thing. So being aware of the inclusion balanced by the potential lack of inclusion around it is an interesting thing to always be aware of. And I think it's just like anything, just taking what it's good at and going and running with that, and don't try and force it into something that it doesn't really work. If it's really not working, just drop it. Do something that is working. I think for Stringcredibles, creating this digital platform, which we were planning to anyway before COVID, it'll allow us to reach much further. Basically, we can't, as 4 people with other jobs and other commitments, we can't take this learning far enough individually. So how could we do it in a way? So we're going to be working with a lot of music hubs and music schools, so empowering the teachers to then deliver it themselves through this content and through basically a sort of a really well structured course that they can dip into if it's relevant to them. So I think that I think it is. I think it's got great potential, but it can't deliver the content that you were talking about, the connection and the spontaneity and the freedom that you want. But it can get you closer to that than not just stopping.
When I met you, I felt like, oh, this might be really, really fun. Like now I've known you for like a long time. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I never actually knew you.
You feel like we're part of your lives now.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's very interesting what you say for inclusivity. That is a big thing at the moment, and obviously with Black Lives Matter also in the forefront of our minds, the very people we need to be reaching, and also the cultures we need to be taking on board and absorbing, rather than putting our music onto other cultures, really understanding other music. Do you think that we can find a way somehow of negotiating these inequalities and somehow understanding and delivering better music to wider cultures and people?
I'm sure we can. I mean, that's a massive question, isn't it? And at the moment at the ABO, because I sit on the board of the ABO, we're looking at a big governance review around inclusivity, and then trying to lead the sector a little bit more in terms of support in making inclusion work, because we've all been talking about it with the best of intentions and with a real desire that it should be happening for probably 17 years, but not really very much has happened. I mean, things have happened, I don't want to dismiss, because there's some great stuff that has happened, but not enough has probably happened, and not enough has shifted, and there are probably very good reasons why they haven't, but equally I think the time has come now that we need to address that, and that's about having different voices around the table in the first instance, understanding the barriers. But I think the interesting thing will be co-creation of work. So actually changing stuff that's on the platform is where we will get real proper connection and proper, rather than putting on a Bollywood concert, for example, that has its value, but it's not a dialogue really, in a way, a dialogue to create new work that has meaning. And we've had some really fascinating conversations at the ABO board. We've invited guests in to come and talk to us about diversifying boards, about language, about the audition process, about all sorts of things. And actually you think, gosh, there's a lot I don't, even though I consider myself ideologically kind of aware, there's also a lot I don't know, and a lot I don't appreciate and would be missing unless we have that dialogue really, really going on and really, really understanding it from all sides, I think. And that stretches to gender and sexuality and all the protected characteristics, disability, and all those things that are so much part of inclusion in the biggest picture.
I suppose one benefit of lockdown and possibly future lockdowns is it does clear time for us to learn about these things and to really engage with them and to listen to them, because they are difficult, and it's hard. What you've just said is a difficult admission to make to oneself, isn't it? And it's so true. It's true of all of us. None of us know enough about what we think we know a lot about, and this feeling of the need for change and the fire is there.
It's one of those things, is being a sort of positive disruptor. How do you get people on your side and take them with you on that journey of disruption? Because disruption puts people into discomfort and is risky. But as musicians, we're quite used to risk, aren't we? We live in risk all 24/7, basically. So it doesn't feel that uncomfortable to me to be pushing into a risk. But I think I can see it is more uncomfortable for people that work in different ways, or people that work in different disciplines, to actually embrace the unknown.
Do you think there's a lot that music, because of this risk element and living with risk and living with potential outcomes that aren't predictable, do you think there's a lot that music can teach other disciplines?
I think it just unites us, doesn't it? At its heart, that's what music does. It brings you all into one space. If it's talking about an emotion or talking about a experience of some sort, it's a uniting thing. And then you feel it on a emotional gut physical level, don't you? And I think that's something that's sort of undeniable. It does bring us to a sort of place of humanity and connection. I think the potential in people is infinite, so understanding on a human level. You see people that are shut down or frustrated or angry or lonely, or how do you bring back out their potential? How do you see what they could bring and support that? So I think, as we were saying earlier, mentorship, I'd love to have more of a role in that sense, advocacy around that kind of support, those kind of support networks they're not namby-pamby, touchy-feely, they're about aspiration and they're about inspiration and they're about giving your best and being your best, and there's nothing better than feeling like you've done your very best, is then somehow somebody's been changed, or the world's been changed, or people think differently, or a door's been opened for somebody. You think, if I could open that door or help them push that door, then where will they go? Let them go.
We're keen to discover what you enjoy about these episodes and how we might build on this venture. We'd be delighted if you made a comment on the YouTube or Vimeo page where you're watching this, or go to the Music Room page of the Shropshire Music Trust website to tell us what you think. Thank you for watching.